I'm Kelsey Litchfield, and this is the Field Advisor Podcast, where I talk with local experts to unpack the latest agronomy information and research, giving you the knowledge to make informed decisions out in the field. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Field Advisor Podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey Litchfield. I've been talking with Mike here for about 10 minutes. I'm like, we need to start recording because This is some good conversation. So Mike is one of our Illinois soy envoys this year. He's been a soy envoy before, and I'll get to that. But I wanted to introduce Mike real quick. He's what I call a seasoned veteran. He's probably seen a lot of it over the years, and he can definitely share some of that. But he is the Specialty Products Marketing Manager of the Wabash, I asked him how to pronounce it correctly, Valley Service Company, which is part of FS, correct?
Right.
And you're down in Allendale, Illinois. Mm-hmm. How long have you been there, Mike?
I have been with Wabash Valley for 31 years.
Okay.
I started out here in Allendale as a salesman, as crop specialist in 1994. In 2002, I moved to our Browns facility. We started consolidating locations, as a lot of people did in the industry then. We went from 22 or 23 locations to 11 in about 5 years. And we consolidated 4 locations and to 1 at our Browns facility. I went over there and I ran that facility for about 5 years. And then I was an area manager for a while. So I had responsibilities over multiple locations. And then in 2011, after a couple of years of planning, we saw the writing on the wall that, NP and K has been our bread and butter, and crop protection has been our bread and butter for as long, and seed, as long as Wabash Valley's been in business. Originally Wabash Valley was conceived to supply fuel and oils in the 1930s. But then we got into fertilizer and all those other things. And we could see that specialty products is a pretty broad idea.
I was going to say it is. What all entails with that?
Well, I take care of all our adjuvants, and we have a few that are proprietary that we have made for us. I do most of the work on secondary and micronutrients. Head up the research. I don't do the research. I'm the idea guy. I come up with the crazy ideas that, hey, let's try this. And then Jay Tharp, who is a past Illinois CCA of the Year also, he does the proofing. He does all the test results. And then I do seed treatments. I take care of seed treatments, biostimulants, and I've kind of dabbled in biologicals, and that's something we can talk about later.
I was going to say, what's the craziest idea you've put out there?
Oh, wow. Let's see. Well, we started looking at true biologicals that had like 12 hours live on seed after you apply it in probably 2004.
Ooh.
2005.
Way ahead of its time.
Yeah, we were really way ahead, And then we were trying to push wheat yields. Now, this is about that 2005, 2006 time frame. We were really 2007. We were really trying to push wheat yields. And down here, we broadcast wheat, which I think it works, but not if you're trying to really push yields. And no one owned a good drill, or we had a few air seeders around that guys were using to sow soybeans, but wheat was really ignored. I mean, it was just, okay, we're going to plant wheat. They'd buy the wheat from us, or they'd bring wheat in here. We'd mix it with fertilizer and spread it with a spreader truck. Real scientific, and then disc it in. So I went to the boss and I said, hey, why don't we buy a wheat drill and let's drill wheat? He goes, that's nuts. I said, well, yeah, but it might work. Let's try it. So we did it for about 3 years, and it was nuts. It didn't work. I mean, It worked, but you just couldn't be everywhere at once.
Yeah, but sometimes those craziest ideas might work, so you got to try it, right?
Yeah. Well, probably the craziest thing that we did that worked is about 10 years ago, I was trying to find a foliar sulfur product. I'm a big believer in sulfur on soybeans. Sulfur is a remediation for a lot of different stress issues. And we went to a supplier, and we've been going to this supplier for about 3 or 3 years. I need this product. And I was talking to the manager of the division. No, we can't do that. So one time I asked while the lab rat was in the office, and he goes, "Oh, we can do that easy." Everyone in the room turned around and looked at him. And that is our number one foliar biostimulant and foliar nutrition product that we sell now. So
Mike,
some of them work, some of them don't.
Right. Going back to those biologicals, what'd you figure out there? Was it, you were like, maybe not so sure. You said you tried it in 2004. What came out of that? Just nothing, or?
2004, the biological we used, it was sold to us, or not sold to us. It was pitched to us as a soil moisture maximization product, and it came through research done by USGS, actually done in Yellowstone Park at Old Faithful, and there's grass that grows around Old Faithful year round. So they thought, well, if we can get the stress gene out of that and put it onto a crop, then we can extend, we can make it so much more stress resilient. And it was supposed to extend the permanent wilt point of the crop that you applied it to, and it was live on seed for 12 hours. So we run it through the seed treater, and we got it in a planter, and we got it planted double crop beans. I figure if we're going to look at stress mitigation, let's look at and moisture loss, let's look at double crop beans. All year, look great. 16 rows or 31 rows. It was a Kinsey twin line. 31 rows, nice green beans, 31 rows, wilty beans. Mm-hmm. We harvested them. No significant difference. They looked prettier. They did, but they didn't yield anymore. And that's the worst scenario I've had with biologicals, with true biologicals. What we found with biologicals to this point, I still think, I'm going to qualify this, Kelsey. I still think over the next 10 years that biologicals will be the biggest game changer in improved yield and improved return on investment that farmers will have over the next 10 years. It'll be the newest innovation.
So what's the problem with it now? Why aren't they seeing that now?
It's too inconsistent. There's lots of reasons for it. The primary reason is you're dealing with a living organism, and how many variables do you have with a living organism? Okay?
A lot.
Okay. So atrazine came out when I was like 4. Atrazine's been out forever, 60-some years. It works the same way every time because it is a organic compound, or it's a chemical. It's made exactly the same way. Now, you may use a different emulsifier, you may use a different carrier, but the active ingredient is going to be the same every single time. And it's going to act the same way every single time in adequate moisture and correct environmental conditions. A living organism just can't do that. It probably the most popular biological that farmers use is a soybean inoculant for bradyrhizobium for nitrogen fixation. And I can't get a consistent, got a really great inoculant we use. We've used multiple different inoculants, great inoculants. They will perform exactly as sold, but the variables after they're treated, you put them back in a black box and you let them sit out in the sun for 4 hours, that bacteria is dead. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with a living organism. And I think that's something that a lot of people in the industry, not just farmers, but everyone in the industry, I think when we figure that out and how to keep that stuff alive, now there's a couple of them. I hesitate to talk about products, but there's a couple of biologicals that we're working with right now that are very durable. They're tough to kill. So we're doing some experiments with that, but I'm not convinced enough about them yet to talk about them on a podcast.
Yeah, so would you tell a farmer to keep using biologicals, or are they a waste of time right now?
I would tell a farmer not to give up. Don't ever quit. Don't bet the farm on it. Watch how much money you invest. Don't go spend $40,000 or $50,000 in equipment thinking this biological is going to pay for it in 3 years. The first year it may go great guns, and that's what we found. I've dealt with some biologicals out of South America. We've used some biologicals that were created here in the States. 1 year, for example, I think it was in 22, in our corn, we have an Illinois Farm Bureau nutrient stewardship plot that we do. It started out, it's called the inlet plot, nitrogen nutrient loss inhibitor demonstration plot.
That's a lot.
I just call it inlet.
Yeah.
And we do that through Wayne County Farm Bureau, and that's one of the oldest grants that's still active through Illinois Farm Bureau's nutrient stewardship program. And we have a field day every year. We have 75 farmers show up. We have a great time. We talk about how we are more efficient with nitrogen. How do we, and we're growing 200 bushel corn with 135 pounds of N. Now, we're putting a lot of other stuff in there, but and we look at ROI and all that. In 2022, we raised 243 bushels of corn in one plot using one biological, 135 pounds of N. The next year, that same biological didn't perform at all. So the potential's there. We just got to figure out what the variables are.
It seems like you're going to have a hard time to control. It seems like you're trying to control the uncontrollable, with weather and environment and things. And that seems like a steep hill to climb.
I've got people in the industry that I got a lot of respect for, and they're not all at Purdue, but a lot of them are. But that's where I've got connections. And
he's close to Indiana, folks. If you don't know where Allendale is, you're just right on the line. Yeah.
Yeah. Back before I blew my shoulder out, I could throw a rock from here and hit Indiana. Well, wasn't a very big rock, but, and I'm from Indiana. I mean, I went to Purdue, so but I also am really close with the extension people across the river with Purdue Extension. And in my opinion, through Illinois CCA and having him at our conference and other things that we get Sean at, I think he and Sean Conley were very fortunate to have two of the best soybean mines in not in the Midwest, but in the U.S. right here at our disposal. And I know you guys have had them as speakers. We had them when I was at CCA conference. And Sean Castile really likes when I fix pork chops. So if he knows I'm cooking, he shows up.
So is that what we need to do for the forum next winter? If you'll cook us pork chops, you'll come.
Hey, you know what? We can do that. My smoker's on wheels.
Okay.
We can cook 800 at a time.
Wow, I'm writing that down.
Yeah, we cook. Oh, we could talk about cooking as long as we talk about soybeans.
The thing is about Forum is that I'm an Illinois alum, and this year we held it at Memorial Stadium. Really cool venue. It was very enjoyable.
Sure.
But we did get asked. We said, I'd love to see Sean Castile come. And he did to one of our Better Beans the year before.
Yes,
and,
I remember that.
Let's talk about Sulfur, because I know he's been to Commodity Classic, talked about Sulfur there. Illinois Soybean Association, we have On-Farm Trial Network. They're doing sulfur studies this growing season. I'm hearing a lot more growers do it. What's your guidance there when it comes to sulfur on soybeans? You recommend it, but what's the recommendation a little bit further? What should farmers be aware of?
One thing you got to remember about sulfur is you got to treat sulfur just like you treat nitrogen. Sulfur is an anion, so it's going to be active in the soil. It's going to be mobile, very mobile in the soil. It's not real mobile in the plant, but it's very mobile in the soil. So if you're going to do soil apply, and I recommend soil applied first, foliar applied as a backup. You can never apply enough sulfur foliarly to grow a crop. You can apply enough sulfur foliarly to mitigate some stress or as a stopgap. if you got saturated soils or dry soils, excessively dry, and you're not, you don't have enough moisture for nutrient mobilization in the soil, a foliar will get you by for a little while, but it is never going to replace. You're never going to get me to replace soil fertility with anything foliar applied. Foliar is a stopgap at best. I like. We use a lot of MES 10, simply because it's got phosphorus in it.
Is that a product you guys just sell, or?
No, that's Mosaic product.
Okay.
That's anyone can buy MES 10, any retailer. And it's got sulfate sulfur and elemental sulfur, 50%. There's 50% of each. So I like that because you're spreading your phosphorus load out. We have done some AMS, fertilized grade AMS. So is Sean. Pretty good results with that. Potassium sulfate, which is hard for us to get down here in the southern part of the state and is extremely expensive. We have very good results out of it. Sean likes potassium sulfate better than KCl mixed with another sulfur source, because he doesn't like the chloride in the KCl within 3 weeks of planting. He wants you to apply your KCl potash at least 3 weeks ahead of planting, because you can inhibit germination with the chlorine. Okay. And I agree with him on that. One of the things that we've been using, and we've used some synthetic and we've used some mined, whatever I can buy the cheapest, is gypsum. Now I'm going to go out on a limb. To some people, I'm going to sound like an idiot, but that's okay. I find that the leachate rates with gypsum on sulfate sulfur is slower than sulfate loss with AMS. There are benefits to applying AMS to soybeans because you're getting nitrogen and sulfur. I hesitate to add too much nitrogen, although both Sean's advocate adding more nitrogen than I do, and Dr. Belo does as well. I'm afraid of making them lazy and they won't nodulate like they should. But
okay.
One thing legitimately we have found is that the gypsum we get slower leachate rates, so it stays in place longer. A few years ago, we did a tile drain study, about 47 tiles here in southern Illinois in 10 or 11 counties. And we tested for all the nutrients coming from the tile drains. And this was at the very beginning of the nutrient loss reduction strategy. And we wanted to see here in southern Illinois, okay, how much work do we need to do? And, we found out we were losing on average during the growing season. If the tile was running between April 1st and November 1st, we tested it. We just wanted to see throughout.
How often did you test it?
Every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And over all those hundreds of tests, we averaged right at 9 parts per million, which is below the threshold of where we needed to be. So we were pretty satisfied with that. But because we tested the lab that did our work, they tested all the nutrients because it didn't cost us anymore. And I'm like, okay, that'd be kind of cool to see. We found out we were leaching sulfur at a 10x rate to nitrate nitrogen. Now, how crazy is that?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't matter if it was corn, because we didn't pick cornfields. We just picked these tiles. We even had one tile that was draining a CRP field. It had been CRP for 10 years.
Really?
That was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because you're still mineralizing nitrogen. We were losing about 4 parts per million of nitrogen off a field that had no crop applied.
Just sits there. Yeah.
Just sits there. So, we knew that though. We know we mineralize nitrogen, but it was pretty fun. But the thing we learned was applying sulfur to crops here in southern Illinois is just as important as applying nitrogen. And boron, with boron, it's hard to tell because you're using such a minute amount. So we just put it on. We put it on dry fertilizer. We put it in UAN for corn. We put it foliar for soybeans. We just put boron on everywhere.
And this current marketing / economy, looking at soybean prices, are you seeing farmers say, "Yep, I'm going to still put the sulfur on," or is that an input you're seeing that they're cutting? What's the synopsis there? I'm trying to evaluate. Last fall people were looking left and right to cut inputs. And you talk to your CCA, talk to your agronomist, because it depends on the field and things like that. But what are you seeing when it comes to inputs?
Okay, back in December, January, when we were doing prepay and we were doing pre-planting and we were making all these, plans, what's the first thing a farmer cuts in corn production? Nitrogen stabilizer. I ordered another semi-load of nitrogen stabilizer yesterday, and we had enough in inventory to do what we did in 24. And I just ordered another semi-load, and I hope that's enough. Well, no, I don't. I hope it's not enough, but it's
right.
But I was just talking to one of our crop specialists about this very thing an hour and a half ago, and he said they ain't slowing down. They're a very wise man once told me, a guy that I respected an awful lot. He was a really good farmer, farmed for, I don't think he retired till he was 75. And he was a good neighbor and a good friend. And he was kind of a mentor to me over the years. He said, it don't matter. You got to grow a crop.
Right.
He said, you can't sell what's in an empty bin. You can negotiate a price, but if you don't grow a crop and fill that bin with it, you're done. And I always took that to heart. We struggled here for years, 50, 55, 60 bushel soybeans in this area. And in the last, and I hate to admit this, but it's just been the last 10 years, we've popped up 75, 80 bushel beans. And it's because of management.
They're managing it just more instead of just throwing it out there and crossing their fingers.
Yep. And we're fertilizing for a soybean crop. For most of my career, we fertilize the corn and the beans scavenge. The only time you fertilize soybeans was if it was continuous beans. And and a lot of guys, if you went over where I'm from in the Wabash River bottoms, you might go 4 or 5 years straight soybeans because you just couldn't get in to get corn planted.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't even soil test because, them beans didn't take anything. Beans don't use anything out of soil. We know that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think management is just, and genetics. I mean, our soybean genetics are just phenomenal now compared to what they were 15 years ago.
Yeah. What would you say is your soybean management philosophy? I'm asking all the soy envoys this because being a soy envoy, we're focusing on soybeans. And I tell people you can't say planting date because I think that's one that's well talked about. So besides planting date, getting them in the ground earlier, what do you tell growers what's your philosophy when it comes to soybean management? Besides just managing it, maybe get a little bit more specific on what they can consider.
Okay. On corn here in Southern Illinois, and I'm pretty sure every corn grower in Illinois is the same way. Their whole deal is to get that corn to tassel as quick as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then now used to, we just get it to tassel and we're done. Now we got fungicides, so we got to do that. And we do have to do that. I mean, I'm not being facetious. And then, we go to the lake. We're done. Corn is made. It's all in God's hands now. We're going to wait on timely rains. Soybeans, you're just getting started when the corn tassels. You've got to manage soybeans from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Don't forget that. And I wish I had one. There's probably one here on my desk, and I'm not going to turn the camera around where you can see my desk. It's functional for me, but most people would think needs a match thrown on it.
I think that's all that counts. You sound like my dad. He goes, I know where everything is. Don't touch it.
My desk is not a mess. It's in a high state of readiness. But the little Purdue soybean or crop field guide, corn and soybean field guide that we've been using for a corn production guideline for 45 years. In there, I don't know if it's still in there, but there used to be one in there about insect defoliation of soybean leaves. And until you got to 50% defoliation, you didn't see significant loss in yield.
Is that just for your area, or is that across the board?
That's across the board. That's what Purdue put out years ago in that guide. And at that time, it was probably right. But today, where we're micromanaging everything, we know that 70% of the energy to produce the soybeans, to fill the soybeans at each node, is from that petiole and those 3 leaves at that petiole. We know that. Why in the world would you want half that leaf gone? Sunlight's what makes soybeans. Everything else we do, is just to supplement photosynthesis. A soybean leaf is a solar reflector. It's a solar collector.
It's a solar panel. I know.
That's what it is.
Stephanie has said that. Yeah.
It's that simple. So we have to manage the entire season that we save as many of those solar panels and they're viable as possible. Light interception is the single most important thing and probably the least paid attention to, the least managed. And to keep and really all you can do is keep the leaf alive and green. Everyone says, oh, you got to ding them beans at about V3, or they're not going to, nodes are going to be a foot apart and all that. Okay, that's fine. After V3, you protect those soybean leaves like they're your livelihood, because they are. Keep them green, keep them, I think that's one reason fungicide in soybeans is such a great thing. We keep those. And these guys that complain, oh my gosh, I can only cut beans 3 miles an hour. They're only making 107 bushel, but I can only cut 3 miles an hour. I'm sorry. You're going to have a hard time getting sympathy. But I think we just need to, a few years ago, it's when I was an envoy the last time, which would have been.
Which Mike's he was one of the first soy envoys for this program when it started back. I think we said 2015.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stephanie and I and several others from around the state. But we got to meet the yield champions from Brazil.
Oh, interesting.
They actually came to ISA headquarters, and we got to spend a whole day with them. And there was a yield champion from each region or state or whatever, and then the overall champion from Brazil. And they were like, man, how do you grow soybeans? You guys got it easy. We were talking, and they were raising 100 bushel soybeans with a 0 soil P test.
How?
Yeah. That's what I wanted to know. But those soils are so weathered and so old, because there's no glaciated soils in, South America or in Brazil, because they're cleared rainforests. And now you get down into Argentina, then you got, prairie soils that are kind of a little more similar to what we have in northern Illinois or central Illinois than what we have here. But yeah, they were single digit and 0 P tests, and they were counting 100% on applied phosphorus to grow their soybean crop. Huh. It was crazy. I mean, it's just, we think we got it figured out, and we do. I mean, we've proven that, but we got it figured out on our soils.
I was going to say, did they learn anything from you guys?
Yeah, they like farming in South America. They didn't know what to think about an indeterminate bean, because they're 100% determinate. I don't think they plant anything below a group 6.
Oh, interesting.
I think I may be mistaken, but I think they even plant some 8s, but they're all determinate. I was in a field out east several years ago with some guys from Brazil that were there through an award program. Well, the Environmental Respect Award from Crop Life magazine. And we were there for that. And we were out in the field. That don't matter. But we were out in the field and they go, what is wrong with these soybeans? They're blooming and they're still putting out green growth. And I'm like, they're indeterminate. And they didn't know what the difference was.
What that means.
But, theirs get, chest high and then bloom from top to bottom. So that was interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It kind of leads me to a question you were talking about earlier. So these top yielding growers, I know there's the record soybean yield is what, 207?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Don't quote me on exact, but I know it's over 200 down in Georgia, I believe. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you talk about managing soybeans. You need to manage soybeans in order to get those higher yields. What is, I guess what I'm trying to say, some of these high yielding fields, they're throwing the kitchen sink at them, and that's not realistic maybe for everyone to do. So what do you tell a farmer that wants to get higher yields? He's already managing it, but maybe they're seeing a plateau. I'm just not getting, and they've done everything that they can think of. The weed control is there. They're doing it all, but at the same time, they don't want to throw the whole kitchen sink at it because that's not cost efficient for them either. You get what I'm saying? Like I'm trying to.
Return on investment is the most important thing we do. High yield's great, but if you spend $1 and a nickel to make $1, you're not going to be in business very long. Probably the most important thing that any farmer does is manage your farm. It's great to watch YouTube. It's great to listen to a podcast. It's great to go to all these field days. But I can tell you right now that I can do the same practice in Wayne County as we do in Champaign County. We'll get completely different results.
It's a field by field basis. Not even like the farm. It can be depending on the location.
And we can micromanage the acre today better than we've ever been able to with the technology we have. I started out fooling with precision ag back in 95 and with grid soil sampling and all that. And I don't deal with precision ag a whole lot anymore other than how can we use this? And we're doing some new models with, we're working with a company on organic matter and CEC as a basis for water holding capacity on variable rate seeding and variable rate applications of fertilizers and the potential. Anyway, do research on your own farm with your own equipment. Then your research is good. Almost every farmer today has a yield monitor. Most of the planters today, you're going to have a monitor in your tractor cab that you can do as applied, gather as applied data. Most sprayers today, like our sprayers here at this location or at any location, it won't move till you tell it what to spray.
Mm-hmm.
You tell it what's in the tank and then it records it. Fertilizer is the same way. It records, if we make a variable rate application, it records every pound on every acre. You have that capability. Your retailer has that capability. Use that to help you learn more. If you want to do a foliar application of sulfur and boron, or you want to do a top dress application, we got some guys doing some top dress applications of urea over soybeans. I've never seen it pay here. You'd think it would because we don't mineralize nitrogen. We can't hold nitrogen. You can, we got a 1.5 to 2% organic matter and a 9 CEC. You get in Champaign County, that's called a gravel road.
Yeah.
What gravel roads there are in Champaign County. But you have to manage for your environment.
And not
It's
look
just
too
that
much at
simple.
your neighbor.
Don't pay any attention to your neighbor. Your neighbor is doing things just to aggravate you. My dad and his neighbor grew up together, went to school together. They farmed next to each other for 50 some years. And every spring, my dad would go out and work the field west of the house. Don would drive by, see dad out there, go get his tractor and work the field east of his house, hit that quicksand hole and have to get a cat to pull the tractor out.
Oh, no.
Every year.
Every time.
It was just like clockwork. And dad was doing it just to fire Don out. So it's just, and they were like best buddies, but dad would go, watch this. And Don would bury it.
People get along like that anymore. Like, I feel like everyone's so cutthroat all the time. Like, oh, they have better equipment than me. They have better this than me. And it's like, like you said, just do things for what's best for your farm, your operation. I don't want to sound like a preacher here, but I hear so many comparisons, and it's good to talk to people.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean maybe it'll work for you. But I know one of our soy envoys last year, Eric Beckett, who works for Align IFS, he wrote a great article when it talked about trialing, like trying things on your own farm and kind of how to set those things up. Like, try it yourself first. And I know there's people out there that can help you do that. But, it's just sometimes I just hear people say, oh, they're doing a lot better than me, or they're a 5,000 acre farmer and I'm, less. And it's like, no, you manage your field your way.
Yeah. And I've got a customer that's also a neighbor and also a very good friend that their family is huge on YouTube. I mean, they're one of the, they're really big in YouTube. And they put out, this time of year, they put out 2 videos a week. And the wintertime, they put out 1. But he would be the first to tell you, this works on our farm. That this works because of the way we manage things. This may not work on your farm. Don't go out and do this just because we're doing it. You might try it because, but I know what goes into their research. I know what they look at. And very little of it is not research that's done on their farm. They don't pay much attention to anything except for what they're able to do. And they have, let's see, at one time, they have, I think, I've got it all on this laptop, except for the last probably 10 years. But at one time, they had yield results from their farm, yield maps from 1996 forward. That's a lot of yield data.
Mike, what do you think is the next tech thing? Like, that's a very broad question, but I always like to look down the road. And I know you say you don't do a lot with precision, but just precision ag in general. What are you seeing that you're like, oh, that's interesting?
Okay, I just saw this on X or Twitter or whatever the heck you call it. I follow a professor at Cornell, and she was at UC Davis before she went to Cornell. And she is one of the top weed scientists in the U.S. And she just had a post about using AI on a sprayer. Now, it's a hooded sprayer in vegetables. This isn't a row crop yet. But I think AI and technology and drone technology is the most exciting thing as it applies to weed control. I think,
so See and Spray?
I think in 10 years, See and Spray will look like Fred Flintstone's car. And I am not being derogatory towards See and Spray. Right now, those programs between BASF Bosch and John Deere and all those are fantastic programs. But you're going to see that. Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here. In 10 years, you will see drone colonies doing weeding in row crop fields.
Oh my gosh, that seems scary.
You will see a colony of little Roombas going around in corn and soybean fields 24/7, and they'll either zap a weed with oh man, I know it sounds like science fiction, but they'll either zap it or they'll dig it up. And I've seen these little drones they've got a little, like a tiller, like a 6-inch wide tiller. And they go through there and they go, oh, that's soybean, leave it alone. That's cockleburr, let's eat it. And then that's soybean, leave it alone. That's giant ragweed. And I think that in 10 years, maybe 15, but things are coming so much faster than I ever expected. I think that technology wise, I think that'll be a big deal.
We got to figure something out for resistance to herbicides. I mean, I was just talking to Byron the other day about it, Byron Hendricks, who's another Illinois soy envoy, about herbicide resistance and things like that. And the integrated weed management, figuring out other ways is going to have to happen. And like you said, it's probably happening. It's going to have to happen at a faster pace.
The thing is, I got to be really careful here because I don't want to step on any toes, because I believe that organic farming has a place in our industry, and it should. I'm of a generation that I can remember when we had 4 or 5 crop protection chemicals that we used in corn and soybeans. My grandpa said, why in the world would I want to be an organic farmer? I farmed organic for 45 years because I didn't have a choice. There wasn't any other alternative. So that's part of the mindset in mainstream agriculture today. But our ever-increasing consumer base is looking at, okay, I was just reading a thing today, a thread that someone said, well, I can eat this, this, and this, and it doesn't bother me unless it's loaded with glyphosate. Well, how the heck can you tell if carrots are loaded with glyphosate? You can't even spray carrots with glyphosate. But that's their mindset. So if that's their mindset, that's their reality. And my dad had a phrase for that, but I can't say it on the podcast. But something about getting your head up your rear end far enough. But anyway, that's their reality. So I think not only is weed resistance an issue, which it very much is, but I think our consumer demanding a different way of growing crops than what we're doing.
Oh,
today.
For sure. I just listened to an episode the other day that talked about the Maha movement. If you don't know what that is, and I won't go off a tangent. We don't need to dig deeper, but I
just can't see a Kennedy in a Republican administration. But anyway,
they're talking about pesticides more and more. I mean, because they're wanting to do tests and things like that, and they're blaming the farmer. And I want to write a whole thing on it, and we'll see if I do, but it is out there. I think that's just good to acknowledge that. I feel like these conversations kind of ebb and flow, through the consumers. Yes. Like I said, I don't want to get too much into it, but it's just something to be acknowledged that, realize that it's happening. So,
and yeah, it's just, we are consumers, and we have the way we want to buy things, whether it's a new car or, like we were talking before, whether it's a blue tractor or a red tractor or a green tractor or a yellow tractor or an orange tractor. And I'm sure I forgot a color, but, and is it lime green, or is it John Deere green, or is it Oliver green, or Steiger green, or, it's anyway.
Yeah. Okay, Mike, as we're wrapping up, I want to do kind of like a rapid fire type round. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
And they don't have to be short answers, but just kind of the first thing that comes to your mind. So looking back on your experience, as I call you a seasoned veteran that's seen a lot, what advice were you given that stands out the most?
Never be satisfied.
It's a good one.
Never give up. Never quit trying to get better. My grandpa always had a lot of advice, and so did my dad, but my grandpa was really influential on me. And I was lucky to get to know him as long as I did, because he was 60 when I was born. But it never be satisfied. Always look for that next. He was very progressive at a time that being progressive was bigger equipment. My grandfather farmed, and his dad, my great grandfather, farmed 1,000 acres in 1915. they had 8-horse hitches. They pulled 8-foot. Can you imagine that? An 8-foot disc with 8 horses. So, and he was very progressive up until his time in the 60s and early 70s when he got out.
Yeah.
So never quit.
It is interesting. We were talking about this before we press record, going to Rantoul, half century of progress in Illinois. It happens every other year. It's happening this year. I think it's so interesting. You keep going back and see how things used to be. And it's amazing just to reflect on how far technology has come.
Yep.
Okay, second question. What's something you've learned from a farmer? So it could be a practice or it could be back to advice. What is something that you've learned from a farmer that you've still used today?
Oh, wow. I'm going to say 90% of what I know or what I do, I learned from a farmer. Probably the one thing that stands out in my mind the most is you can't save your way to prosperity. He said, I never made a dime saving money. He said the only way, and I got a lot of respect for this guy. He's retired, but he still owns the farm, but he's retired. But his thing was, don't tell me how to save money. Tell me how to spend my money that I make more. And I think that's kind of always the attitude I've had. But to hear a farmer say it,
solidified it.
Yeah, and that's good advice. And there's times you have to be careful, like right now.
Yeah.
But you still got to grow a crop.
Right. I think that goes back to what you said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, is there one app or piece of tech you rely on daily that you'd recommend to others?
I use the crop removal app from Ag PhD. And I really like that app because I can bring that up regardless if I'm talking to a farmer, one of our crop specialists, a high school student, college student, an intern, and I can say, here you go. This is what we're going to remove. And I think that is probably the app I use the most. I've tried some disease and weed recognition. I'm not.
Not there yet.
Look at it. I'm not there yet. But I'll be 65 years old tomorrow.
Happy early birthday.
There's some things I'm a little backward in. Not a lot, but some of those things I just want to figure out on my own.
Yeah. Yep.
And I use Google a lot. I mean, Google is a great thing. I mean, there are resources at your fingertips because Google looks at everything.
Are you using ChatGPT or any of those AI things?
Nope.
I've been using ChatGPT more when I need, like, for example, this is going in the weeds. For example, my shark robot, something's going on with it, and I couldn't figure out how to do a software update. Instead of Googling it, I just went to ChatGPT, entered in my model number, and it searched the entire web faster and more focused, narrowed in on that problem than anything I've seen. I didn't get my answer because I had to call support, but still, it just feels like, I don't know, I'm going to get an answer faster. So,
well, I may have to try to figure out how to work that then.
I use it on my browser. I'm not sure if you can download it as an app. I'm sure someone out there knows that, but I say use it with caution.
Yeah. I don't want to create a monster.
Yeah. Mike, if you weren't in your current job, what do you think you'd be doing?
Oh, geez. I don't know. I can't imagine. I've done enough other jobs that I don't really know in agriculture what it would be. If I wasn't doing something in ag, because if I was doing something in ag, I'd want to do what I'm doing right now because I love my job. I mean, there's a reason I'm not planning on retiring. I really enjoy.
There's a reason you've been there 31 years.
Yeah, but if I was going to get outside of ag, I think I'd want to talk to farmers. I don't know. I think I'd want
Well, for those of you who don't know, he has a radio show. Maybe you'd be a farm broadcaster.
Yeah,
There you go.
I might. I I really enjoy that, and I really enjoy communicating with non-farmers on that and kind of telling our story. Um, the problem I've got with being a broadcaster is several years ago I was at a conference and I spoke. At that time, Dr. Scott Morrell was with the International Plant Nutrition Institute, and he spoke before I did.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott is very dry, a great guy, and he's fun to talk to one-on-one. And he said, I'm Dr. Scott Morrell, and I have a voice that is more relatable on National Public Radio. And I'm next, and I introduced myself as Mike Wilson. I have a voice that's more recognizable if it was on Hee Haw. So, you can tell I'm from Southern Indiana. I'm not that far. I didn't grow up that far from Kentucky, but we did wear shoes. So
that's yeah. That's good.
You can't be from where I'm at and not tell Kentuckian jokes.
We've had Carl Bradley from Kentucky come to some of our stuff. He was the plant pathologist down there. So we get out of Illinois.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I enjoy Carl and Dr. McGrath down there. He's not at Kentucky anymore. But as far as
we have some great resources in Illinois and outside of Illinois that have been in Illinois before. So I think that's a good mix. Okay, Mike, my last question for you. What do you wish someone would have told you before you went into this industry? I know it's been a part of you, but what do you wish you would have, what would you have told yourself back in college or when you were younger, now being where you are today?
Patience. Be a little. I wish I had been a little more patient. I'm a real forgiveness over permission kind of guy, and that served me pretty well most of the time. But there have been some things. One thing that I was told that I have always lived by is put family first. My wife and I have been together. We were talking last night. We had our first date 49 years ago this month.
Wow.
And
that's great.
Yeah. And we just can't get over that, it just kind of popped in my head. And I can even tell you where we went, what we did, and where we ate. And, but it was always put family first. And I think that's
great advice.
That's one thing that I've done is I've always put my family first. And
one thing I don't think anyone would regret. No.
No. That bean field will get planted. That cornfield will get planted. That fertilizer will be spread one way or the other, but you'll never get to see your daughter win a spelling bee again.
Aw.
So.
Yeah, that's great advice. Mike, how can people find you? I know you're on X. Are you on anything else or just X? He tweets some great stuff. He tagged me in a tweet the other day. What was it? Where the water was still flooded. Is it still pretty flooded down there? Yeah.
Well, the little Wabash is doing more damage than the big Wabash right now in the Ohio down. We go all the way down to the Ohio river bottoms. And the Ohio is really big right now, but it's starting to fall out. Downtown Carmi was about shut down because the little Wabash was actually over Highway 1. You could still drive through it at your own risk, but you meet some idiot going 40 mile an hour, you run the risk of losing an engine. But it's falling and it's getting better. They're giving us 2 inches of rain over Easter weekend here. Don't really need that. Was in about 5 counties yesterday. I had to go move some product around.
Planting's underway where they can get to it, right?
Yes. Really need another 4 or 5 days before the whole company would be really cranked up.
Okay.
But we got a lot of sand. We're pretty sandy right here along the river. But we've also got a lot of the picture of the irrigation system with water up over the wheels.
You won't be needing that for a while.
And then a quarter of a mile west of there, they had dust flying working in the field. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Well, Mike, thanks for joining me. I got to learn a lot today, and I hope our listeners did too, but thanks for joining us. Mike, by the time this episode airs, his first blog will be up, and he was looking at 1970s soybean management. So it was a very interesting read. So if you want to read it, go to fieldadvisor.org and it'll be posted there. So,
well, next time will be the 80s.
Yep.
So this was my 51st year, my 51st crop. I started out as a freshman in high school in FFA raising wheat and double crop beans, and it's in the blog. It's in the blog. So,
great read.
It was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I just wish I could have found some pictures, but we weren't real big picture takers. I got pictures from the 20s, and teens, but I've actually got pictures of my great grandpa's threshing machine. And
you should post those on Twitter.
I may do that.
There you go.
I may do that. So
that sounds good. Well, thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Thanks for listening to the Field Advisor Podcast. Unbiased, independent agronomy information to keep your farm moving forward. I'm Kelsey Litchfield, your voice from the field. This podcast is funded by the Illinois Soybean Association Checkoff Program. Stay connected with Field Advisor on social media. Follow, like, and share to keep the conversation going. And don't forget to subscribe to the Field Advisor Podcast on your favorite podcast platform.